Welcome to OAA Now, your home for Oakland Activities Association news and information. Here's your host, Sammy Taramina.
Welcome to OAA Now. Here I'm Sammy Taramina, blog around the OAA, the host of Last Seat Brain Cells, known between Taraminas and Orion Television. I'd like to welcome those watching on the local voice on SoundCloud and those watching on Orion Television. A lot to look at here in this week here on the podcast. Here we're going to recap Week 8 stuff. Obviously the crossover component. I know I looked at Brandon Fossum's thing. Should the red, blue, white, gold crossover should be played. And also we got some basketball news of new coaches over at Avondale and also at Ferndale University when it comes to girls basketball. Avondale boys basketball also as well. So we're going to break all that down here on this week's edition here of the podcast. Without further ado, let's start with boys basketball. Let's start with basketball. Obviously, we're going to go with the girls first because I think this is an interesting one. Ferndale University. They named their new girls basketball coach Brian Pickett. He takes over the program for Benny Zukowski, who stepped down after the year. Of course, Ferndale University just recently introduced boys coach and Anton Bradford. So Pickett with his history, of course, he was at Detroit Universal Academy from 2021 to this past season. He's been at Detroit Star International Academy. So this is a really interesting hire because obviously I know not a lot of the basketball pundits know a lot about Pickett. Obviously he's had some success in the in Detroit, especially at Star International Academy and also Universal Academy. So you kind of think about is, it's interesting because Ferndale University, yes, they are an OA school. There's not a lot of students at Ferndale University. Considering, you really look at, when it comes to the OA basis, Ferndale University, they're one of the lowest schools. So you kind of think about what Pickett brings, and I had a really hard time doing my research on Coach Pickett. But there's some question marks. There are some question marks. Can he put together a program at Ferndale University? Can they be competitive? That's the other question. You really think about, that's the big question that I have with this hire at Ferndale University is, it's the same thing I asked about with Bradford when he was at Detroit Osborne. 32-48, the record, and you really look at what Pickett brings. There's not a lot I can share with you guys. There's not a lot because, I don't know, what Ferndale University saw, in Pickett. Can he put together a program considering what's going on at Ferndale? And Ferndale might not field the girls basketball team, and that could be a big problem, considering everything that's happened to that program. So you look at Ferndale University. Under Benny turned around that program. 2 years ago they were winless, and then last year they had 10 wins. And it's gonna be Pickett's challenge to keep the momentum going. What helps him is he's got some experience coming back. You look at players like Tanaya Crawford, Kaylee Miller, Janiyah Reynolds, Jada Wilson, Tamaya Hill, Tamari Powell, Kendall Spencer, Suhi Green, Nariah Pryor, and Aria Matthews coming back. That's a good stepping stone for University. That's a good stepping stone. When you have that type of talent coming back and you have that type of a program, program coming back, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. The question is, how will he handle that talent? And then you got to look at, of course, building program strength. Those are the two big questions that I have with Pickett at Ferndale University. You're in a good division. You're in a manageable division. And you look at the gold this year. You got Farmington, North Farmington. Might be your two favorites in the division, but you got Pontiac, who's got a lot coming back. You look at Oak Park, they got a lot coming back. And then Ferndale U, they got a lot coming back. So really, when you look at the division, it looks manageable, but you have a team that has a lot of experience coming back. But they got a lot of a transition period, and they're going to have to do that during the season. They're going to have to really do that, and that's going to be the challenge that Ferndale University is going to have to deal with. So I'm curious to see how this is going to look for Ferndale University. I'm curious to see. I don't know if hypothetically if Ferndale and Ferndale U would merge, which could be possible because considering Ferndale when it comes to program, you don't know if they're going to have enough players to come out. I mean, obviously, you look at the ripple effect. Obviously, you look at a lot of Ferndale's kids. I mean, some of them transferred to West Bloomfield. Basically because of the stability of the program. So it's going to be interesting to see. One, does Ferndale have a program? And then two, what happens to those kids if they want to play girls basketball at Ferndale? Do they go to Ferndale University? And, that's always going to be the challenge. So I'm curious to see what happens because basketball season, girls season's not that far away. It really isn't. And, obviously you look at, the boys season starts first and then it's the girls. So I'm curious to see how this would work at Ferndale U. And then the question mark is with Ferndale is, are they going to fill the program or not? Because when I look at the MHA website, they still don't have a coach yet. And you don't know if they're going to fill the program or not. And obviously, you look at the division. Ferndale right now is in the blue, and Ferndale University is in the gold. So I'm curious to see how that would go. And then when it comes postseason time, you really think about what Ferndale University is. You look at Ferndale U, and they are in a district with, of course, Ferndale. They can field a team. Then you have Birmingham Detroit Country Day, which that's going to be a big time threat. We know how good Detroit Country Day is, well coached under Aberdeen. They have Shane Laws as assistant coach now at Detroit Country Day. Also forgot to mention Waterford United is also coming in the league. So Waterford United, they got a very good star player in Savannah Satoris coming in. So Waterford United could be a player in that division as well. So that'd be interesting to see. But you're in a district with Birmingham Detroit Country Day. We know how loaded they are. Hazel Park, I don't really have an idea what they're going to look like this year. Centerline's been struggling, and Mass Knights Lampiers has been up and down. So district looks winnable until you get to Country Day. I really don't see anybody touching Country Day in that district. I really don't. So it'll be interesting to see how Pickett handles this transition period. And, the transition period for sure is going to have to happen during the year. I'll be curious to see how he schedules non-conference. And I think that's something to really keep an eye on is how do you look at scheduling, your non-conference. I mean, you got 22 games. I mean, like, you can play. And, obviously, that's a good it'll be interesting to see how the players adapt to Pickett and how Pickett handles the the players. So that'll be something to really keep an eye on as we head into the start of girls basketball season. So it'll be really interesting to see. We're also keeping an eye on the Ferndale situation as well because that could also impact Ferndale. So it can impact Ferndale University. So that's really something to really look at as we head into the start of the season. So It'll be interesting to see. Now let's go from girls basketball. Let's go to boys basketball. Avondale, they got their new head coach, Aaron Fox. He's back. He takes over the program. 2 years ago in 2020, a couple of years ago in 2023, he was the interim coach under Pat Clancy. And obviously, he led Avondale to an 8-8 record. So now he's back in the fold, takes over as the coach of the Yellow Jackets. The MSU website confirmed the hire. Obviously, we talked about Jared Thomas when he stepped down. Obviously, excuse me, he wanted to take two jobs. Obviously, and I get it. Coaching both at Avondale High and then at Oakland Community College associate coach, but it was going to be very challenging for that. It was going to be challenging because of logistics. It was similar to what Shea Lewis did when she was at Schoolcraft College, and look what and she also took over the girls program at Rochester Adams. So so similar approach, but it wasn't going to work out because excuse me. It was going to be one or the other. And obviously for Thomas being associate head coach, it's once in a lifetime opportunity. Don't get me wrong. So he had to step down at Avondale. So now you bring in Aaron Fox. Of course, Fox does bring some basketball experience. Obviously, being the interim coach, he was an assistant at Clancy. So now you bring him in to the fold. You have a loaded team that you have coming back, and you really look at when you look at players like, excuse me, Jacoby Loris. He's one of the top players that Avondale's got. Obviously, you look at Noah Bonds, Anthony Burton, Jaden Bergeras, and Javante Anderson. Plus, you add Max Mull to the fold, and you got yourself a pretty good team here. You got yourself a pretty good team. And you look at how are the players going to respond now that Aaron Fox is new head coach? How are the players going to respond? How is the program going to look going forward? Those are so many questions that Fox is going to have to address, and I think that's really something that you have to really look at is, how's the transition period going to look? How is the team going to look? And if this team struggles, because I know a lot of those kids that went to Avondale obviously wanted to play for Coach Thomas, and we know the pedigree that Jared had when he was at Auburn Hills, also when he was at Rochester Adams. He's a proven winner, don't get me wrong. And I think he's going to do really well at OCC. But I'm curious to see how Fox handles this at Avondale. I'm very curious. Because there's going to be some questions. There's going to be possibly there were other candidates, you know what I mean, that, the question is, could these players mesh with Coach Fox's system? That's the big question. Then you look at the schedule. Their non-conference is brutal. It is difficult. And that's not mentioning the Red, where, you look at that division and you're staring at, you're looking at, obviously, North Farmington. Yes, North's got a new coach in Pete Mantilla, but still the same system, the Negotiation system over there. Farmington, we know, is an up-and-coming team. And we know the job that Coach Byron Johnson's done over there. He's done a really nice job, changing the culture there. You look at players, and they got some proven players on that team over there. Groves, we know, has been a well-established program under Coach Mark West. Yes, it did lose a lot of talent, but Groves, Coach West, he's going to have them ready to go night in, night out. West Bloomfield, we know Coach Arnett Jordan, what he brings to the fold. Um, he does a really good job with his kids. Defense is still my biggest concern with Coach Jordan's team. I saw them this summer. They look good. They look solid. And then you have Ferndale. Ferndale, obviously, you look at with Ed Vineyard back. They got Torrento Adams coming back. I still got concerns about their depth. So that's something to keep an eye on there with Coach Juan Rickman's team and also the athletic director over there at Ferndale. And then there's Clarkston. Reason why I say Clarkston last, and I think this is a pretty simple analogy. Because you look at what Avondale did last year under Thomas, and they beat Clarkson 3 times. 3 times. That is pretty unheard of for a program like Avondale to beat a program established as Clarkson 3 times in 1 year. Especially going into a place like Clarkson, that was hard. That's hard to win it in the first place, is going into Clarkson and winning there. And then the game I watched, when Avondale just completely, they shell-shocked Clarkson. It went in a low-scoring game. They shell-shocked them. And then the third time, it was a back-and-forth game. But Avondale ended up winning that one, I think, by 7, 58-51. So, Clarkson's going to be circling that game. They're going to be circling Avondale. They're going to be circling them. So, I'm curious to see. And then that's not even counting the district, which you're going to have Clarkston in there. You're going to have Waterford Mott in there. You're going to have Lake Orion in there. So those are 3 capable teams that could win the district. And then Waterford Kettering, they should be improved, but I'm curious to see how they're going to look. So you really think about with Avondale, you look at the Yellow Jackets and you think about with Avondale is, can Fox put together, can he and the players get on the same page? If they get on the same page, then I think Avondale could have a really nice year. If they can't, then that could spell trouble. And you really think about with Avondale is, I'm curious to see how the players adapt to Coach Fox's system. And is Coach Fox going to keep the same things that Coach Jared Thomas did? Or is he going to go to more what Coach Clancy did? So there's a lot of question marks when you look at Avondale, when you look at the direction of the program. I mean, program strength has been a concern, but I know they have Steve Laidlaw down there coaching a junior varsity program. I'm very curious to see what Coach Fox does with this program, because you don't know what's going to happen. Is there going to be some changes in the lower levels? Is there going to be some changes? I mean, there's going to be some changes, but, I'm curious to see, is he going to be able to keep some of the staff that Coach Thomas had? I mean, there's just so many questions with this hire of Coach Fox. Obviously, are the players going to buy in? Can they get that? If they can get they get on the same page, and they're more than capable. I mean, like, if they can, then if they get on the same page, Avondale could be in line for a very good year. If they can't, this could spell trouble. Obviously, when you look at Avondale, they have the talent to be. I think they can win the Red if, with the talent they have coming back. When you look at, and then you add a guy like Max Mullen to the system, you put him with Noah Bonds. You have Jacoby Loris. Only concern I have with Avondale is going to be the interior, but the speed of that makes up for that. So it'll be interesting to see how the players respond to Coach Fox, how Coach Fox responds to players. Be curious to see how things go, and that's going to be the challenge here. And I think that's going to be the challenge for Avondale is, how are they going to adapt to Coach Fox and his system? for Coach Fox is putting his program in place over there at Avondale. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I think, you look at media day, you look at during the season, we expect those questions to be answered. So I think that's going to be something to really keep an eye on. It's an interesting hire at Avondale. It's really interesting for them to go back to their past, to bring in a guy like Coach Fox. I'll be curious to see how he handles this team. It's a senior heavy team. I'm curious to see how they can handle this. Because, if they get out to a good start, it'd be great. But if they don't, that could spell trouble. But as I mentioned, there has to be a transition period, and it has to happen during the year. So that's going to be something to really keep an eye on with Avondale is, the transition period and, of course, how the players adapt. And that's the big question mark we have with them heading into the year. So we'll see what happens. Now let's go from basketball. Let's go to football. When you look at last week, you had the crossovers, the red, blue, the white, gold. I read an article from Jared Fossum, and I know a lot of people criticized the crossover component, and I totally understand what they're saying, but when you look at some of the games this weekend, you look at, of course, the red and the white, the gold and the white. It really wasn't close when you look at all the games. You look at, of course, A&T blew out Pontiac. You look at Harper Woods over Ferndale, Stony Creek over Berkeley, Rochester Royal Oak, and then Groves over Avondale. So really, you kind of think about, you look at, okay, for playoff stakes, postseason stakes, in that division. I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes, and I think that'll be something to really keep an eye on. Is what happens? What happens? You look at, of course, and I look at, of course, the Macomb Area Conference. They do some sort of crossover game. Between the red and the blue. And the MAC's got more schools than the OAA, and they do a crossover with certain teams in the division. So they do a certain amount of crossovers there. You look at the KLAA, and the KLAA does their crossover week 9. They do it based on competitive standings. And you look at between the West and the East, and that is an interesting component. But there's been some competitive games when you look at the red-blue crossover. You look at, of course, I look at a perfect example. Troy Athens. You look at with them. Last 2 weeks, they played Oxford tough. I thought they outplayed Oxford. That game ended up going 31-28, favor of Oxford. And then you look at North Farmington. North Farmington led Oxford 14-7 at the half. And only for North Farmington's discipline to come back and affect them. And that was the difference in that game, was North Farmington's discipline. They had at least three to four unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, which led to long drives for Oxford, led to touchdowns for Oxford. So that was the difference in that game. And then you look at Oak Park and Lake Orion. That game, Lake Orion led 14-0, but Oak Park came back, in that game, but they had numerous false start penalties, numerous unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, and they ended up losing that one 14-13, in that game. And I think a lot of that was Oak Park's, discipline issues got to them in that game. And Lake Orion just basically had to hold on and survive. That's really what the bottom line was in that game. It looked like was, you look at those two games. Those two games would really tell you, and then you look at the rest of the games in that division. You look at Adams blew out Seaholm. Clarkston in a battle of league champions. With them in Farmington, that was not even close. It was 49-7. I mean, like, that kind of tells you where, that was. That was battle of two champions there. Adams and Seaholm was the battle of the Veer. Battle of the Veers, of course. Adams, of course, runs the Veer. So does Seaholm. Both teams run the Veer. And then West Bloomfield, Bloomfield Hills, the return of the Battle of Bloomfield. Bloomfield Hills, they got a long way to go. Getting their program back. West Bloomfield won that 137-0. So you kind of think about, but Coach Scott Merchant is going to get that team back. They're going to get that program back to where they need to be. So you kind of look at the overall aspect of it. You really got to think about, you look at the crossover, you look at some of the storylines in the rivalry games. I mean, like, obviously, the Battle of Bloomfield, that's a rivalry game. You look at Adam Seaholm, Battle of the Veer. You look at Clarkson, Farmington, where the battle of the red champ versus the blue champ. Oxford North, that was going to be a good game regardless. And then Lake Orion Oak Park, I mean, you don't know what was going to happen there. I mean, in that one, but, that could have gone either way. I mean, that game could have gone either way. So, really, when you look at, if I had to have an opinion on the crossovers, I would say, honestly, you'd move the red-blue crossover to week 2, and then the red-white crossover to week 8. Same with the blue-gold. I think the blue-gold should go to week 8, and then the red, and then the white-gold crossover should be week 2. So, that's just my take on it. But I'm not sure what's going to happen next year with the league. And then you're adding in Waterford Kettering, Waterford Mott, and you're taking away North Farmington and Farmington. Both of them are leaving for the Lakes Valley next year. So I'll be curious to see what they do with both Waterford schools, especially when you look at Waterford Mott. Considering where they're at, it'll be interesting to see what they do. It'll be really, really interesting to see how this will look, and especially when you look at next year when it comes to realignment. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a lot of storylines to keep an eye on this offseason. You look at, of course, the offseason storylines. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of them to keep an eye on. So when you look at recapping the games, obviously, let's start with the red-blue before we go, and then we'll go white-gold. The red-blue, obviously, the champions battle between Clarkson and Farmington, 49-7 favor Clarkson. You kind of really look at this game, and I'm going to look at playoff implications too. Let's start with Farmington's case. I really feel like Farmington, ever since that loss week 2 against Holly, they've managed to turn things around quick. You knew it was going to be a tough game for them against Clarkson. You really knew that it was going to be really tough, especially with the Twins. The Clarkson's defense has been improved. But when you look at Farmington, they needed a lot. I feel like they needed a loss like this to humble themselves. Make sure they're focused when they play Dearborn Heights Crestwood this week. It's at home for them. So you think about with Coach Jason Albright's team, you're going to be in the postseason, and you're looking at a postseason matchup. You were originally looking at possibly seeing nobody Detroit Catholic Central in the first round, but I don't really see that now, considering what happened to Northville. When Northville got upset by Novi. And that was a real crazy game. So you think about, with that scenario, Farmington could be looking at maybe going to the Swamp in the first round. They could be going there. That's a possibility. I think right now, Novi Detroit Catholic Central right now in the first round is off the table right now, which Farmington could go to the Swamp. I know that's what Snooze is seeing. But I think when you look at Farmington's scenario, they could be staring at they could stare. There's a couple of scenarios where Farmington could stare at. There's a couple scenarios. And you kind of think about with them is Farmington, I think, could be looking at is could it be possible Farmington goes to could they send Heartland? Could they send Heartland over there? And if that's the case, could they send Heartland? I mean, that's the possibility there. That's an option. So Farmington, right now, according to Snooze's map, he has them going to play West Bloomfield in the first round. That's a difficult matchup for them. Basically, Northville I feel like Northville basically just, they just did themselves over. And even if they go 7-2, I still think they could still be going to Novi Detroit Catholic Central in the first round. But there's still that possibility Novi Detroit Catholic Central could go over to, they could send West Bloomfield to Clarkston, or they could send Heartland to Novi Detroit Catholic Central and have West Bloomfield play Farmington. That is another possibility. So that's Farmington. To me, everything looks for them. They're staring at West Bloomfield right now in the first round. Then you look at Clarkston's fate. Oh boy. I had some talk with some people in the Clarkston community about this. And where do you see Clarkston? First round, could they send West Bloomfield over? I don't think that's likely now. Could they send Heartland over? That's a possibility. The realization for Clarkston is they could stare at Grand Blanc in the face. They could really much stare him in the face in the district final. That could be a serious, serious problem. And the reason why I say that is you look at what Grand Blanc did to Davison. You look at what they did. I mean, they put a 50 spot on him. And that's a Chris Farr defense. And could you imagine if Davison and Clarkston were to meet in the first round? That's a difficult matchup for Clarkston. Do I think that's possible? I mean, if the MHA were to put Oxford with Clarkston and if they put Oxford in there, that would send Davison to Clarkston and Oxford would play Grand Blanc in the first round. That would be a brutal district. That would be brutal. Because Davison we know is a very good team. We know they're good. They got a good quarterback. I mean, their defense was exposed by Grand Blanc. They also, of course, let's not forget, Davison knocked off De La Salle. So, yeah, that's going to be I mean, if Oxford's in that district with Clarkston, that could spell trouble. That could spell trouble for Clarkston. Because I don't know if you're a Clarkston fan and you have Grand Blanc possibly in a district final, that could be problematic. I don't know how good Clarkston's defense would be against a team like Grand Blanc. That could be a serious, serious problem. So that's something to really, really keep an eye on if you're Clarkston. If you get Heartland in the first round, that is a great matchup for you. But you're still staring at Davison or Grand Blanc. And then if you get by that, you're staring at Novi Detroit Catholic Central. Most likely. So that's really where, if you're a Clarkston fan, you don't want to see Davison in the first round. I don't know if you want to see Oxford in the first round. I don't know if you want to see Adams in the first round. you really don't want to see Grand Blanc in the first round or in the district final. Because I'll tell you right now, the way Grand Blanc played against Davison, that could be trouble for Clarkson. That could seriously be trouble. Because the way their quarterback played in that game. I don't have the name of the quarterback on my mind right now. I really don't. But that could be a problem. So for Clarkson, there's a lot of options. Who they could play. News has to play in Heartland. There's been people that say they could play West Bloomfield. Could they play Adams? Could they play Oxford? All are in the cards right now. They all are. But everything's pointing to Grand Blanc in the district final. And that could be, and if Clarkson's got to play Grand Blanc in that one, that matchup looks scary. That matchup really does. And the key for Clarkson in that game is they're going to have to develop passing game. I mean, Winchester's going to have to throw the ball. I mean, because I don't know if their offense can, Clarkson's, I don't know if Clarkson's offense, with how good the Twins are, they're going to have to really balance it out if they play Grand Blanc. It's pretty straightforward there. West Bloomfield knocked off Bloomfield Hills 37-0. The Bloomfield Hills we know is going through a period under Coach Scott Merchant. I think next year they're going to be fine. I really do. West Bloomfield, obviously I watched Civic Center TV's broadcast. I know Tyler Keith did a really good job analyzing the districts versus the Goose Poop. There's still that possibility they can go to Clarkston. But it's looking more and more likely they're going to probably see Farmington at home in the first round. And then they're probably staring at CC in the district final. That's a possibility. I mean, now if they lose to Roseville, they could be going to CC. That is really dangerous for West Bloomfield. That really is dangerous for them. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot of options for West Bloomfield right now. It really is. Oxford had to survive North Farmington 27-14. North Farmington had that game until their lack of discipline came back and haunted them. And Oxford really took advantage of North Farmington's lack of discipline. I mean, you think about it. If North Farmington stayed disciplined in that game, then they really, then they're fine. So you look at North Farmington's case. I see them right now possibly going to Livonia to take on Livonia Franklin. And if that's the case, it's a beautiful matchup for North Farmington. They can still play Groves. They can still play Seaholm. That's a possibility. But if they got to play Orchard Lake St. Mary's the first one like they did last year, that could be a problem. That could be a big problem for Coach John Herson. So you think about, for North Farmington, if they went to Livonia to play the Patriots, that's a great match for them. If they go north to play Orchard Lake St. Mary's, that's a brutal matchup. Now, Birmingham Brother Rice could be a team that's into the fold as well. And that could be a big problem as well. Could Birmingham Brother Rice play Orchard Lake St. Mary's? That's a possibility. Because that game was 43-31 over at St. Mary's. So that's a team to really watch out for. If you're North Farmington. So if you're North Farmington, you look at the playoff scenario for you, I would probably think about going south into Livonia to play the Patriots. Because that's a much better matchup for you than going north. It'll be interesting to see how that one goes. Oxford's case. They're staring Romeo, right? Right now, according to Snooze, he has Romeo playing Oxford. Romeo Grand Blake's going to be a fun matchup. That's going to determine a lot. Grand Blanc beats Romeo. That's a big deal. Oxford, if they can get a home game out of this, it'd be good for Coach Trevor Potts and the Oxford community. It'd be very good for them if they get Romeo coming to Oxford. That would be very good for them. Clarkson's still on the table for Oxford. It still is. Could a rematch with Adams be on the table? It's still there. I mean, there's options for Oxford. I don't think Oxford wants to go west. If they go east, that looks very favorable. Really favorable. Adams, 45-7 over Seaholm. In that one, Adams, when I look at them, when I look at Adams, right now they look good for number 1 seed in their district. Macomb, Dakota looks very vulnerable right now. I mean, they've lost 2 of the last 3 games, including an upset loss to Utica, 26-17. If Adams can get any of those Macomb County teams coming to Adams, that's going to say something. That'll really say something because Adams looks really, really good. Maybe have 2 or 3 home games. They look really good for that. They're looking at Stony Creek in the first round. That could be a firework game. That could be a really good game. And for Stony Creek, the options are also there for them because they could go to Romeo, which I think they can go in Romeo. I think they can go in there and beat Romeo. I really do. Could they go play Utica or Utica Eisenhower? That's another option. Utica Eisenhower is not the same team they've been. They just lost 30-27 to Lakeview. And Lakeview, we know, is a team that runs a wing T offense. I still can't believe that one. That was a stunner. That game was a stunner. So there's options for Stony Creek. I mean, Stony Creek, I'll talk about them in a minute. But for Adams, there's a golden opportunity here for them to maybe host 3 home games. The bad thing for Adams is if they're drawn with Clarkson. That could be very bad for them. That could be very bad for them. If they were to play Clarkson in the first round, that is not a good scenario for them. So that'll be interesting to see what the MSU does with Adams. Seaholm, stay away from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. That's what I'd say. Stay away from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Could they play Birmingham Brother Rice? That's a possibility. Could they play Groves again? That's a possibility. There's options for Coach Jim DeWall's team. They play Groves this week. So that's going to be interesting. But if you're Coach Jim DeWall, stay away from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Because if they get him in the first round, that won't be looking good. Will not be good. We'll see what happens there. Lake Orion 14, Oak Park 13. Oak Park's playoff hopes are pretty much dashed. Could they win out against Boomby Hills? It's a possibility. They could. That is a possibility. Could they win out? Sure it is. But I don't know if that'll help playoff-wise. I really don't know. For Lake Orion, it's been a tough season for Lake Orion. It's been a really, really tough season. They're going to go through a lot of changes this offseason. They're going to go through a lot of changes. You kind of got to think about, if you watch that game and, offensively, they struggled offensively in the second half. They fumbled twice. You kind of felt like in that game, if or especially early on. I mean, Lake Orion looked good. I mean, they had a kickoff return for a kickoff for a touchdown. Anson Adams looked good. Then you had, I don't know what happened. I really don't know. Defensively, they played well. I mean, defensively they played well, but it kind of felt like in that second half that game was slipping a little bit. That was really slipping. Oak Park was gaining momentum. Then come the undisciplined part of Oak Park. Numerous false starts, unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, just a lack of discipline cost Oak Park in that game. They had a penalty that moved them back, forced them to go for 2. Didn't get it. Allowed Lake Orion to run the clock out, and they ended up winning that game. But as I mentioned with Lake Orion, there's going to be a lot of changes. A lot of changes got to be done this offseason. They do got a lot coming back, though. They do got a tough match with Saline this week, though. But they do got a lot coming back. So that should help things. They're going to have to clean a lot, but there's going to be a lot of changes next year with Lake Orion. There's going to be a lot of changes. And they got to address it. Then let's go to the blue gold games. And the white gold games. Harper Woods, no issue with Ferndale. 40 to I think that was 40-8. Obviously Harper Woods is preparing for multiple home games. As I said for Harper Woods, they could get Goodrich or Chelsea coming to Beaconsfield Street. That's a big deal. That is a big, big deal. Especially if they can get Goodrich come down to Harper Woods. That is a big, big deal. I mean, Harper Woods is not afraid to go on the road either. Do I think they're going to go on the road this year for the playoffs? Not likely. I mean, they knocked off Clarkson on the road. They knocked off Saline on the road. That's pretty much enough said right there. Harper Woods clicking off cylinders. Ferndale, I don't really see a playoff avenue for them right now. I really don't. But you never know. I mean, they had a really tough loss to River Rouge. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with them this offseason. I think Coach Donovan Jackson, he's done a really nice job with that program. It's taking the first step. Now comes year 2 next season. And I think Ferndale could be a really scary team to watch next year. They could be. Rochester 41, Royal Oak 0. Rochester's been playing well last 2 weeks. This has been a team to keep an eye on. Rochester. You look at Rochester, they have a shot to get into the playoff. They got a shot. They just need to beat Monroe, and then they got to get help. If they win that, they get the help they need, they can sneak in. If they sneak in, they could be seeing Adams in the first round. So, Rochester, if you're a Falcon fan, hope's not lost. I mean, you just got to knock out Monroe and get some help. It's bottom line. Royal Oak's case, playoff hopes pretty much dashed. They got Clawson coming up this week. Should win that. Allows the program to keep on developing going forward. I think Coach Colin Campbell's done a really nice job of that program. You get 4 wins out of that. That's not bad. Really is not. So it's a good path heading in the offseason with a lot of confidence if you're Coach Colin Campbell. So it's a good path. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. A&T 36, Pontiac 0. Pontiac, as I mentioned, they're still developing their identity, developing a program. A&T's kind of at the same boat. But A&T, you got to look at A&T and you got to think to yourself, what's going to happen with them? Should they go down a division? Should they go down the blue? I mean, that's a big question mark for them. So we don't know what direction A&T is going to be in this offseason, Coach Keith McKenzie. But there's a lot of questions with A&T. A lot of questions. Pontiac, they're building an identity, building a culture there. It's going to take some time. Both these teams are going to take some time. And both teams got difficult matchups this week. I mean, you really look at with Pontiac, they go to Brandon to take on Ortonville Brandon and Coach Brad Zuby. Of course, Zuby was the last coach to lead Pontiac into the playoffs back in 2011. And then you look at A&T, they got Chippewa Valley. Chippewa Valley, same boat as A&T, having a really difficult year, playing a tough schedule. So that should be a really interesting game. Really will be. Then you look at Stony Creek 37, Berkeley 0. Berkeley's playoff dreams pretty much got dashed by this game. So Berkeley, but they've had a nice year under Coach Casey Humes. They've had a nice year. They've had a really, really nice year. Stony Creek, as I mentioned, you look at with them, possibly looking at Adams in the first round. Could they go to Romeo? That's a possibility. Could they see Ike in the first round? That's another possibility. I would still think for them, more and more likely is going to be Adams that they see in the first round. And if that's the case, we're looking at a rematch. We're looking at a possible rematch in the first round. And that game went overtime between the two teams. That went overtime. So that could be a really interesting game if those two teams played, Adams and Stony Creek. But Stony Creek, they got Ann Arbor Huron this week. Going out to Ann Arbor. They should be fine in that one. They should be fine. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in that matchup. Groves 42, Avondale 14. Groves, when I look at them, same as Seaholm. Stay away from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Everything else looks very favorable. Everything else looks favorable except Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Even Birmingham Brother Rice, I think, looks manageable for Groves. I really do. That could be a really interesting game. Groves has been rolling right now. They've been rolling. Red hot right now. They've been rolling. A lot of confidence right now with Groves. And I mean a lot of confidence. Avondale's case, you look at with them, it's been a rough year for Coach Jim Carlisle. Rough first year. Schedule was brutal. Yes, they had to go to Cedar Springs week 1. Now they got to go play Carlton Airport week 9. That's going to be difficult for Avondale. And it's a real possibility they can finish the year at 1-8. Real possibility. So there's going to be a lot of question marks for Avondale this offseason. How will year 2 look? That's going to be the big question for Avondale. How will year 2 look? Because it's going to be interesting to see what Avondale has next year. They should be better next year. They should be. And, of course, with Coach Carlisle, he's going to have control over the schedule, the non-conference schedule. It's going to be for sure closer, that's for sure, than what Avondale experienced. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we're going to see really what happens. Then you look at, of course, the Waterford schools. You look at Kettering and Mott. I mean, for Kettering, they had a rough one against Walled Lake Northern, 46-0. Oh, boy. I mean, Kettering's going to have to go through they're likely going to have a coaching change next year. There's a lot of questions with Kettering. A lot of questions with them. So it'll be something to really watch for with them. And then, you got Waterford Mott coming up, your arch rival. I remember last year when all Kettering had to do was win, was a winning in game, and Waterford Mott spoiled their season when Mott won 13-9 against them last season. Now, you look at the case of Waterford Mott. Waterford Mott's in a similar situation where, if you win, I'm not sure where Mott's playoff positioning is indeed too, but if Mott were to get in the playoffs, they could stare at possibly playing Midland Dow in the first round. And we know how good Midland Dow is. Look what they did to Lapeer. 50-0. Albeit Lapeer and Waterford Mott are two different teams. But still, if Waterford Mott were to get in also, if they have to see Orchard Lake St. Mary's, that's not a good match for them. When you look at them, could that happen? That's a possibility. If Mott were to get in the playoffs, you're possibly either staring at Orchard Lake St. Mary's, which if Coach Trajan say that's a good matchup for you because you know a lot of those kids. And a lot of Waterford Mott's kids know a lot of the kids from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. But if you got to go up to Midland to play Midland Dow, that's not a good matchup for them. Because one, you got to deal with that travel. You would have to go up M24 up to, actually, no, you got to go I-75. You got to go I-75 to around to US 10 up in Midland. That's not an easy matchup. And you got to go into rush hour traffic, which going north on 75 is an absolute nightmare. So there's really two avenues for Waterford Mott if they do get in the playoffs. It's either you're going to Orchard Lake St. Mary's, which one, it's a closer matchup for you, but it's still a tough matchup. Or you're going to Midland to play Midland Dow, which is an equally tougher matchup. But I think you have a better chance going up against Midland Dow than you are going up against Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Because you look at the conferences, you look at the Valley, the OAA isn't much. You look, of course, the conference they're in this year, Lakes Valley, I think that's a much tougher conference in the Valley. We know the OAA is a much tougher conference in the Valley. But you never know. You never know how it works. You never know. So it's going to be interesting to see. It'd be very interesting to see how things will approach themselves as we get into the playoffs. Starts next week. Some interesting games this week in week 9. Keeping a close eye on. Oak Park, Bloomfield Hills could be one to keep an eye on. Clarkson Eisenhower is an interesting game. Even though Ike is not the same team they used to be. Mason Harper Woods could be a fun matchup week 9. Adams Anchor Bay. Oxford Dakota. It's probably the game I'm keeping my close eye on. Because you look at Macomb Dakota. Macomb Dakota is not the same team that they've been. They're not. Last year Dakota went to Oxford and steamrolled them. Dakota has really struggled ever since the Romeo game. They really have not been the same team since that game. I'm also keeping an eye on Royal Oak and Clawson. We know what Royal Oak did to Clawson last year. That ruined their playoff dreams. That's another one to keep an eye on. Berkeley Lampier. That's another one I'm keeping an eye on as well. Oak Park, Bloomfield Hills could if Oak Park win and get some help, could Oak Park be back in the D2 playoff discussion? There's a lot of storylines heading into the final week of the regular season. A lot of storylines. A lot of questions. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we head into the final week of the regular season. Soccer, only 2 teams remain. Clarkston and Clarkston, Troy Athens, and Troy. Actually 3 teams. curious to see how all three of these teams look as we head into the regional. Obviously, Clarkson probably have to deal with they're going to be going west. Troy, Athens will probably be in the same regional. We'll see what happens. All right, everybody, signing off here. Make sure you follow the blog at Saturday4650 at blogspot.com. Also around the OAA, Weebly.com as well. So those are the two websites that my content will be on. Take care, God bless, and I will see you all next week. Anyway, take care, God bless, and God bless all. Take care, and God bless all.